I'm clearly a girl that loves organization, but I hate spending money on storage, which is why I bought IKEA IVAR shelves for our home office. This is the cheapest storage solution that IKEA offers, and it works, but it's not very pretty. So in this video, we're going to be making this look beautifully bespoke and built in, all on a budget. Let's start by getting all of this stuff off the shelves, and then we can go over the plan. Whew, okay, that took a lot out of me, but we've done it. We've emptied the shelves, and now we can get on with the building. So the plan is that we're going to secure this to the wall, which means that we'll be able to get rid of those ugly cross braces. And then we're going to extend the side pieces up to the ceiling and secure it there as well. We're going to add skirting all along the bottom, and then we're going to build custom doors with like a nice relief detail and matching side panels and edge strips, so it looks like it wraps all the way around. And then we're going to finish it off with some cornicing at the very top. The first thing we want to do is get the shelves into the position we actually want them to be in. I don't have any skirting here. You might have to remove that if you have some. So these can go right up against the wall. Apart from, these IKEA IVAR pieces are secured together with dowels. So it means every side piece, on one side it will have dowels on the front, and the other side it'll have dowels on the back. And that means that we can't like push it right up against the wall. So I'm going to go around with this flush saw and just cut all of the external ones. Now that I've got rid of those little dowel pieces, I could push the unit right into the corner, and I just went around with a level to check that everything was straight and plumb. Now is the time to make sure things are straight, because if they're not, like, that's only going to get worse. I've now gone through and drilled through the side pieces into the wall at 4 different points on each piece. I'm not actually going to screw it into the wall right now. Right now, we're going to disassemble the whole thing, including removing those ugly cross braces, because it'll be much easier for us to secure it piece by piece with access from the side. I'm also going to use this opportunity while the shelves are totally disassembled to saw off all of those protruding dowels on all of the side pieces, because they also get in the way when you're trying to fit the shelves. So it's time to take it all apart before we can rebuild. I'm now ready to start fixing the side pieces to the wall. So those little drill holes that we did earlier into the wall, I drilled them out further and put brown raw plugs in, so they'll be nice and stable in the brick. I have had to leave out this one though, because I realized there's an alcove on the other side and it would just go straight through. Instead of screwing through the side pieces straight into the wall, I made these little extender blocks out of a spare side piece. We're going to be using more spare side pieces in the future, so if you just pick up an extra set, it doesn't matter the depth. We're going to use the side pieces liberally in this project. So I cut some 70mm blocks and drilled nice big holes through so I can space out from the wall. This is because the huge plastic Samler boxes that I use for storage are deeper than these shelves, which is really annoying, and I think IKEA have missed a trick on that. Even in their promo photos for IVAR shelves, they show using these boxes, but they peek out the front, which is fine if you don't have doors, but if you do have doors, they wouldn't close. So I'm spacing out from the back. This does mean there's going to be a gap at the back of every single shelf, and things might just get lost down there forever, but I'm okay with that. So let's go fix the first piece to the wall, and then we will talk about how we're going up into the ceiling. After some negotiation, I did manage to get this all attached to the wall. Now let's talk about attaching it to the ceiling. So the reason we want to do this is so that we have something for the coving to attach to at the top. And I thought, wouldn't it be easiest to just use the same wood as these side pieces to continue it on? Because that means it's going to look consistent. If like, for example, my doors are going to be higher than the side of this, it just makes a lot of sense to use the exact same wood. So I measured the gap between the top of this and the ceiling and cut it on my miter saw. Where the holes are on your piece doesn't matter unless you have super tall ceilings and want to put shelves higher than the top of the normal units. Then you're going to have to add these extenders to every single one, but as it is, I'm just adding them to the front pieces. So this piece should fit snugly just here. Gorgeous. I'm going to use pocket hole screws to attach this extender bit into the main unit. If you don't have pocket hole jig, that's no problem. You can use little mending plates along the side. To attach it to the ceiling, I'm going to use these like heavy duty L brackets, and then I can just screw it right into the ceiling. I'm going to prep my side piece down on the ground. I have a menagerie of tools on this table to help me with this project. I'm going to start by drilling the pocket hole screws. So I have my jig set to 38mm here and 38mm depth, and then I'm using 51 or 2-inch pocket screws. For the L brackets, I'm just going to mark where I need to drill. Pre-drilled these holes, and then I'm using some 30mm screws to screw this in. To screw it into the ceiling, I'm going to need to drill holes and put plugs in. But firstly, I need to figure out where that is. So let's go back to the high shot. Okay, obviously this is going to go up here somewhere, but I don't know how deep it needs to be in. So I'm going to check. So I put this in place, and now I'm just going to mark where I need to drill the holes for it to secure into the ceiling. We've got our roll plugs in the ceiling, and we need to put this back in place somehow without scraping the ceiling too hard. But it doesn't really matter, no one's going to see this. We want it to be tight, that's the point. I've got this clamp to help hold the faces together. There isn't much room here, but there's enough. I've got this like right angle drill bit. It was like £6 and it's really useful because would there be enough room in there? Maybe just about, but this is much more ergonomic. Take that off. Very, very stable side piece with a nice smooth front. Great, and now we just have to do that whole thing over several times. Huxley has decided he wants to be in the video. He actually didn't. He came in investigating and then he wanted to run away. I'm worried he thinks we're moving and he doesn't like that. He's a nervous little pup. Okay, I'll let you go. Cool, now we just have to do that whole thing over a couple times. I'm gonna add the shelves as I add each piece in, so I don't have to worry so much about the angle of each side piece this way, because that will just be determined by the shelf position. And hopefully, fingers crossed, because this is all level and square, everything else will be level and square. When I was taking them apart, I marked with pencil where all of the shelves are so I can put them back in the same place. But I'm actually gonna put them 4 holes higher because I want the bottom shelf to kind of line up with the front of the skirting. It would look really weird if you open the doors and it sort of like dipped down on the inside. Moving the bottom shelf up 4 pegs will perfectly line up with the height of the skirting, so that will look nice and neat. Also, you may be wondering what's going on with these little bits. All shall be explained in due time. It just doesn't narratively make sense to address it now. All right.
Don't want nobody else around. When I'm with you, baby, nothing really matters. So I think baby, there's no doubt. Spending hours over at your place. Every night, hold me tight in your arms. Wanting more of you. Do you feel it too? 보고 싶어, wanna take a night. Honestly, I wanna something safer. 말해줘, tell me what I want. Can't keep going on like that. 오늘 종일 leave 우리 사이엔 gamble. 시간 낭비하기 싫어. Please don't. I'm missing my time on you. 이제 정해 leave 그만할래. gamble. 나를 잃긴 싫어. Please don't. I'm missing my time on you.
We are done with this stage of the process. Everything is pretty sturdy and pretty much plumb. I extended all of the front pieces and then I also extended the back right piece because I'm gonna put a panel on this side and it'll be good to have something to attach it to at the top. Now I just can't wait to clean everything up and put all of my belongings back on the shelves so I can actually live in my house again, and then the next job will be constructing the doors.
Honestly, I wanna something safer. 말해줘, tell me what I want. Can't keep going on like that. 오늘 정해 leave 우리 사이엔 gamble. 시간 낭비하기 싫어.
After a few days of recovery from all of that disassembly and reassembly, I am in my workshop to make the doors. It is also freezing in here, which is why I will be hugging a hot water bottle for most of the time. I've decided to make the doors in a fake shaker style because it's just more DIY friendly. A fake shaker is essentially a panel that is the same size as the door that you then glue on extra decorative details to. So I'm using 12mm moisture resistant MDF for the back and 9mm MRMDF for the shaker details. Moisture resistant MDF is usually green and it just takes paint a bit better than standard MDF, so it's much easier to work with. You could use 15mm on the back if you wanted a stronger base. You could also use 6mm for the shaker details. This is just the combo I want to go with this time. To get the size for my doors, I measured at a few points along my shelves the floor to the ceiling height, and then I took off the height of the skirting and the height of the cornice, and then I also took off an extra 10mm. This just gives us more margin for error, but I promise we will make that gap look nice later on. For the width, I measured from one of the side pieces to the same point on the next side piece, divide it by 2, and then took off 4mm. For the wood for each door, you're going to need one rectangle that's the full size of the door out of whatever your back material is. For the shaker details, you're going to need 2 stiles, which will be the full height, and then I'm doing them 50mm width. Again, it's personal preference. 70mm is also quite normal. And then we need 3 rails. The width of these is going to be the width of the door minus 2 times the thickness of your shaker detail, and then the height is going to be whatever your shaker detail height is. I have a full wood workshop here, so I ordered full sheets of MDF and then cut them down on my table saw and with my track saw. But you can order MDF cut to size online, or if you go to a big hardware store that have a panel saw, they can do all the cuts for you. They might charge you for it, they might not, but you definitely don't need to get the tools to do this yourself. I've got all of my pieces of wood cut here, and I'm just going to lay one out to show you what it's going to look like. So this is the base piece, and then we have these 2 really long stiles that will go either side, and 3 of these rails. The height of this middle one is going to be determined based on where we want the handle to go, which is usually around 1 meter off the floor, but I also have to account for the skirting, so I think I'm going to do it a little bit higher. So your fake shaker door will look a little something like this, and you could stop here. It does look nice like this, but I want to add some extra decorative detail. You could add some moldings along the inside of these frames, but I want to do something a little more kind of sculptural. I have this kind of like inverted quatrefoil motif in a lot of my kind of identity online, so I thought it might be fun to incorporate that some way. I thought I could add semicircles to the corners of each panel for this effect, and then I cut some pieces out of paper. I did a lot of like paper prototyping because it's much easier to like understand it when it's visually in front of you. Instead of them being perfect quarter circles, what I've made it look like is if you have these 2 doors next to each other, there would kind of be like a circle over them. So the center of the circle that makes these shapes is like between each door. I'm very happy with the scale and shape of these now. I just have to figure out how to cut them out from actual wood, and I think I have an idea. While I was cutting up all of these pieces, I also cut up a lot of these little blocks, which are just slightly oversized from the corner details I want. And I figured I could use a router with a circle cutting jig to just cut out that exact shape. So I need to make a jig of some kind. I think I'm going to use some scraps. So I'll put a pinhole here, which will be like the pivot point of the circle jig, and then I can just slot that in here and go around, hopefully, maybe, let's see.
Damn, feeling lucky, out above most streets, us two in these trees, diamonds in my feet, caught up in these talks, circling my head top, should've been more cautious, now I got what I wanted, many have been here before, made it out of 11 more, like my frontal cortex, so I can't stop, I want it all, listen up, I'm calling you, I need you to tell the truth, remember when you wanted to, remember that I said was you.
Okay, I have undergone a lot of trial and error to try and cut out these bloody shapes, and now I think I have a system that's like somewhat reliable and not extremely dangerous. I'm using this router jig by Tamar from 3x3 Workshop, which is fantastic, by the way, I'll link it below, and I'm using it on its circle cutting functionality. I have made the distance between the middle of the pin and the edge of the bit 100mm, which ends up in these little shapes. I'm using a 12mm straight cutter bit in here because I want to go all the way through this 9mm material in one cut, and I gotta say, it's very sketchy. 9mm, you should really probably do it in 2 passes and just go like halfway down the material first. But because I've got to do this 48 times, I am trying to cut corners while I cut corners. It is a little too sketchy trying to cut all the way through because the pieces want to just like fling off. So what I've done is I've set the depth of the cutter to be more like kind of 8mm, 8.5mm. So it's all one piece as I cut through it, and then I can just cut off the excess and sand it down. I now cut 10 of these, so I'm gonna lay them out on the door and make sure I actually like the shape. Okay, it's hard to tell whether this looks nice or it's gonna look quite weird. But I think I'm into it. I think I really like it. By the way, if you want a similar look to this but don't want to go through this whole process I'm going through, you can buy MDF rounds online and then, you know, saw them into quarters and create a similar effect. I have a lot of tools here and I want to take advantage of them, but I also want this to be a project that you can do at home with just a drill and a saw. Okay, I am very happy with the way this looks, but I'm going to put a pause on cutting any more of these and start thinking about finish. So I will be gluing all these pieces down to the back piece and then painting them. But all of these raw MDF edges are really porous, so they need to be primed very well. And it's very hard to prime and then sand all of these little edges. So I'm going to take all of my pieces before I secure them together and pre-prime and sand down all of the edges, so it's easier to work with when we get to the actual finishing stage. Okay, I've got to prime all of these edges, and I figured the easiest way to do it would be to clamp them all together, and then I can do all of the edges at once. And these 6 rails need to be primed on both sides because they're the ones that will be in the middle of the doors. I am using Zinza 123, which is a really good sticky water-based primer. And put on quite a thick coat of primer because we really want it to be absorbed into all of the edges. While the primer was drying on all the strips, I made the rest of these little quarter circle things, and I've also like bunched them up in clamps and primed them. They're still a little bit wet, but they will be dry enough shortly. Then I sanded down the edges of the bits I did prime, which means we're now ready to start assembly. I'm going to be using normal Gorilla wood glue to glue things down, and this project was also an excuse for me to get the most adorable little roller set. As well as the glue, I'm also going to be driving little 15mm brad nails in. This is just to keep the strips in place while the glue dries. MDF on MDF can be kind of slippery, so using some little nails to hold them in place stops me from having to be as vigilant about making sure they don't shift as they dry. Totally not required, it just speeds up the process. I also cut these 2 strips of scrap. I think I cut them 800 long, and these are going to be my spacers for the middle rail. Okay, nothing to do now but start. And I've got this little wet rag. Clear out any remaining glue. I don't want to do both of the styles before I do the rails because the rails might not fit in, so we'll do this first. Got to make sure I pick the ones that aren't double-ended and that can fit on the inside. I think it also makes sense at this stage to fill all of the edges between the pieces. I'm just using poly filler, any filler will work. So I'm going over the edges between the pieces and also all of the little nail holes. I will also need to fill the edges of the door where the 2 materials meet, but I want to sand them down so they're flush with each other before I do that, and I don't have the energy to do that today. So 1 down, 5 to go. I'm just going to power through gluing and nailing all these doors together. I assembled all of the doors and then I filled the edges with a thick layer of sloppy filler. I sanded them all down, including all the filler I had on the top, and then I primed them all again and sanded them down. And now we are finally ready for actual paint. I am using a colour called Sea Nor Sky by the Paint and Paper Library, mixed to an acrylic eggshell. This is a sort of greeny blue grey. It actually looks so grey here, but I promise where it's going to be in the office is going to be gorgeous. From all the priming, I figured out the optimal way to paint this kind of door. So I'm using a foam roller brush and a sash brush, and I start by going into all of the corners with the sash brush. Then I load up my roller and go right through the middle. Now I've got paint on most of it. I can clean up the edges by running this line right at the edge of my foam roller around all of these shaker details. That will stop there being paintbrush strokes along the edges, and it will usually push some paint up onto the sides, so that should be enough to coat them. Gorgeous. Well, I'm going to go into time-lapse mode for the rest of this painting. Enjoy what will take me several days in the next 10 seconds.
Straight to my feels, broken trust that'll never heal.
I have finished the doors and they look absolutely fantastic, but that means it's time to address the elephant in the room, which is how we're actually going to attach them. And I have made a prop to illustrate this issue. This is a standard European concealed hinge. On the carcass side, we have a mounting plate that's kind of cross-shaped, and on the door side, we have a hole drilled out that a cup hinge sits in, and these click together like so. The door overlays the carcass and it avoids clashing as it opens up. The problem is our carcass looks like this, which presents two issues. Firstly, the way the mounting plate is screwed on is deeper than the depth of our side piece. And the second issue is that this door can only overlay the carcass by around 18 mil, and this is more than double that, and we don't want to have a huge gap between the doors. So let me show you my solution for this problem. This is how I solved the mounting plate issue. So instead of using cross-shaped mounting plates like this, I use horizontal mounting plates. They screw in at 2 points horizontally instead of vertically, which also means we're taking up less of vertical space because wherever we put these, we won't be able to put shelves in. They still need more space to be screwed on, so I cut more slices of our good old side piece and glued them on. So with the glue and the mounting plate screwed on at 2 different points, this is now very stable. And then for the overlay issue, I had to buy some very particular hinges from Blum, which allow for a larger overlay. This is the code for hinges and it's exactly what you need. So with my second demo, if I pop that on there and this on here, you can see these close up and leave a much smaller gap between them. These hinges also come with a ton of adjustments. So once you click them on, there are 3 visible screws, and by tightening or loosening them, you can tweak the vertical, horizontal position and the depth, which is very handy because it's basically impossible to be perfectly accurate when installing hinges. And by making these small tweaks, you can make all of your gaps nice and even. Back when I had the shelves totally disassembled, that's when I glued on those extra side pieces and put the mounting plates on. Firstly, I had to figure out exactly where I wanted my hinges to go, which is a delicate process because you want them to be somewhat evenly spaced, but I didn't want them to conflict with where I wanted any of my shelves. You can also do that step when they're all assembled, but I found it much easier to do when they were disassembled because then I could pile them on top of each other and also do it sat down. And then before I assembled any of these, I took one of the long strips home and marked up on it where I'd put all the hinge plates. Then it was easy for me to transfer all of those measurements onto the actual doors. I did have to take off the height of the skirting and then 2 millimeters to allow for that gap. After assembling the doors, but before painting them, I had to drill the holes for the cup hinges. So I used this Craig concealed hinge jig. This helps you position the bit and stop you from drilling more than the 13 millimeters that it's supposed to go in. But you can just buy this 35 mil Forstner bit on its own. Okay, now we got through all that, it's time to take the doors home and get started fitting them. Hello! I brought the doors back from the workshop and installed them, and then I had an entire 2-week break because it turns out having chronic fatigue syndrome and carrying very heavy doors and then having to make a lot of adjustments to the hinges really exhausted me. But I've learnt my lesson and I shall now ask for help for more of those kind of physical tasks. I spent the last couple of days adding the skirting, the moulding, the side strips, and to do that I needed to get some more wood. Because the doors sit in front of the shelves, we have to add some strips of something to bring them out a bit. So I bought this plain door round timber just from B&Q. This is 21mm thick, which is the exact thickness of the doors, which is wonderful. I attached 2 strips of it to the bottom and then 1 just above the doors. I also added these strips to the side and I had to scribe that one to the wall because it wasn't quite straight. Around this side, I also added a panel out of the leftover 9mm MDF that we had from the shaker details. And I did have a little problem with the crown molding. So the reason that I had to add a panel here instead of just extending the door to the side, because this is a very awkward corner, is because there's a fire alarm at the top. I would love to move the fire alarm, but it is not in the scope of this project. So we're just working around it. I figured out when I was trying to put my crown molding up that I couldn't get it around there. So I had to do a weird corner thing. I'm not going to show you how to install skirting or crown molding because this was my first time and I did it badly.
See that angle there? Yeah, it's supposed to be angled this way. Also, the pieces kept falling down.
All that's left to do now is to do a lot of filling, sanding and painting. I'm also going to do another paint on the doors because sadly in the transfer from the workshop they got beat up a little bit, which is a shame. And then after that the only thing to do is add the handles. I bought these handles off Etsy. They are octagonal and they have these little kind of finials on the end that I thought would be a nice detail. They're in an antique brass finish and I was really concerned about having handles that fit within this circle because I thought it would look weird if they just like slightly extended the circle. But now I have them, I think they're too small. So I got an alternative. These are from M. Marcus. They're also antique brass and they're quite a bit simpler, but they're really long and I think they will just look fantastic there. I'm going to get going with all of that sanding, filling, painting, and then putting these on, and we'll be back with you for the final reveal. And there we have it. I am so proud of them. I think they look incredible and it's unbelievable that underneath there is IKEA. Before we wrap up, I want to go over the cost of this project. So all of the IKEA shelves and side pieces cost me £324 and everything else all in cost £450. It's not the cheapest I could have done it. Like I spent quite a bit of money on the fancy hinges and the nice handles and some good paint. If you try to do something similar using IKEA's pack system, you would spend more money on the carcasses and the shelves, and you would also spend more money on like really plain doors. With IVAR, you get these solid wood shelves that are much more sturdy and they won't warp, and they're also much easier to rearrange than the packs ones. So all in all, I think this is a very cost-effective and visually effective IKEA hack. Please let me know in the comments if you make something similar, and thank you for watching the very first video on Studio Astrig. If you want to support this channel from its early days, I have set up a Patreon. For every video, I'm going to do a little after show on Patreon with my partner B, which are really fun and share a lot more of the behind the scenes. If that's not your thing, please subscribe and leave me a bit of feedback in the comments. I'd really appreciate it. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.